Hey, Chris.
Yeah, I had a really good relationship with a grandfather growing up, that I wish I would have leaned into him more for advice. I think that um, today's generation, just today in general, we tend to not frown upon the elderly, but just kind of most dismiss them. And we think that we're full of all these answers and that, the times now are better and faster and stronger, and why lean into an older generation? I think there's a lot of answers to and wisdom to be tapped into with an older generation, and there's a lot of regret that I have in not leaning into my grandfather a little bit more for some of his wisdom. As he's dying from heart disease, I'm seeing him all of a sudden out of nowhere. He's got a Bible in his hand, and he's getting in the Word, and I remember these things, but I never really remember leaning into them, because I remember I knew everything at 17, 18, 19 years old, so I didn't really have to ask him anything. But I think that's kind of the culture we're in right now. We kind of dismiss some of the wisdom that we can get from that generation, and we tend to think we've got all the answers, unfortunately.
Right. Well, one of the interesting things about what you said too, as you said it, my mind went to how quick we can go and get answers now in ways we never could before, without actually getting at all relational with anybody. I mean, how many questions do you think get asked to Alexis a day, or Alexa, or the Google, you just, Google knows things, right? So it's like, don't ask that other person a question, and so we have just access to data. But like I mentioned, I read back in July and the first part of August, most of the Federalist Papers, and was really just humbled at the strength of the writing and the unbelievable intelligence of some of our founding fathers, and the way with which they thought and could defend their thinking, and the use of language, and how I felt like a kindergartner reading a college thesis. It was some of it was really labor intensive to kind of come to clarity about what they were saying, because of the way that they said it. Just brilliant, just really, really brilliant. And it kind of betrayed my level of ignorance, and that was a humbling thing, because I think we tend to look back on time without recognizing the wisdom and intelligence of some of the great philosophers, some of the great theologians, some of the great thinkers of years gone by. Well, one thing I would add to this that I think has really been probably, if I look back over the course of my life and say I had a strength, it's that I've always sought mentors. And I don't know that we know how to get mentorship in our life, or we don't know how to ask for mentorship, or we don't know how to be mentored. And I think finding people that you can lean into is such a key to having a quality of marriage, a quality of business. My favorite story in relationship to that is that I was a new pastor at Grace Fellowship in Brooklyn Park, and pretty quickly realized that I was in managing large teams of people kind of out of my depth. And I had seen a older gentleman who I knew had been kind of a captain of industry, had been a vice president of a large semiconductor company down the city. He's retired and maybe had some time on his hands. And I asked if he'd go out to lunch with me, and so we did. And he taught me different strategies for thinking about how to manage people and how to organize my thoughts and then communicate them in effective fashions. And we got together every 2 weeks at a little place called Enjoy China, and it was really great because he was also wealthy enough that he almost always bought lunch. And so there was multiple advantages to the conversation, my learning, my growing, my being able to bring questions to him and having lunch with him was just fantastic. One day after about a year of that, I decided to invite him over to my house and have my family meet him and have him for dinner. And we were sitting in my home in Champlin, and after dinner, Rebecca went and sat up on his lap, and I'm looking across the table and I'm thinking, dang, I wish he wasn't my mentor. I wish he was my dad. And then I was like, oh my gosh, my mom is available. So the next day I called my mom and I said, Mom, I got a need for a small group in your area. Would you be willing to host a small group? And she said, sure. And then I called this man, Wayne. I said, I have a host home in Plymouth. I know it's a bit of a drive, but I need a really gifted leader. Would you be willing to lead it? And he said, sure. And after that, I was like, okay, that's as much meddling as I'm going to do. It's as close as I'm going to get to playing the role of matchmaker. But 2.5 years later, he came and knocked on my door, and he said, you know, Mark, I've fallen in love with your mom, and I want to ask permission to marry her. I want your blessing to marry her. And wow, a few months later, I was officiating a wedding between my mentor and my mother. And what a gift from God that relationship has been. And now I really do think of him as father. And so to have moved from mentorship to having a fatherly voice speak into my life has been one of the beautiful gifts that God has given me.